Hello, everyone. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Alex Milligan, co-founder and CMO at Nugg. What's up, Alex?
Hey Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Can't complain. It's a gorgeous sunny day here in Venice, California, so enjoying it so far.
Awesome. Yeah. For those just listening, Alex and I had a laugh before we started recording because he has this really awesome background for his video conference, and is that the Dogecoin Doc?
I think it is, and he's like on some like alien planet it looks like. But yeah, I had a meeting with my team the other day, and I needed a background, and I don't even know where I came across this, but I thought it was hilarious.
It is hilarious, and so I asked that he please keep it throughout the remainder of the episode, and he's a good sport to do it because it is funny, man.
It's probably better than seeing the back of my room here, so
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing.
No, it's always funny what people pull out when it comes to those backgrounds. So yeah, I like it. But for those listening, I have Alex Milligan on. He's the co-founder and CMO of Nugg, which is an online and mobile ordering platform for medical cannabis. And so, or medical marijuana. I hate to use that term, but medical marijuana because we're talking about THC. So, Alex, what I'm really excited to talk to you about today is not only to learn more about Nugg and the lines of business that y'all have, but we keep talking about in previous episodes about the challenges when it comes to messaging and marketing and sales related to the cannabis industry because of no consumer oversight, right? And no guidelines implemented from the FDA. So I know that your background is extensively and heavily focused in the marketing side. And so I really am excited to talk to you today, not just about the challenges, but really what kind of tactics and things people can do when they're bootstrapping and trying to market their products online and face these challenges, how you've kind of navigated through that process. So before we get into all that, let's talk a little bit about your background and how you kind of journeyed into cannabis.
Sure, sure. So I guess we'll start with my time at college. I went to USC and actually met my two co-founders there. We were in the same fraternity house.
What for?
And we were in Pi Kappa Phi.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, right around the corner of University Ave and 28th Street.
Nice.
Yeah, it's quite the adventure for sure. And I had studied. I kind of always knew from an early age that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, whatever that word really meant. I had like eBay businesses in high school. I was the kid that bought my own car when I was 16, and my co-founders were very much the same. And we kind of all did the same thing. First couple of years of college, we just enjoyed ourselves and did what we could with our classes, but also made sure to get the full experience of social connection and just being kind of silly at times. But then about our junior year, that's kind of when it hits everyone, right? It's like, okay, real life is about to come hit me in the face pretty soon, and I need to figure my shit out.
Right.
And so we had started making decisions that, okay, we needed to develop a skill set. We needed to kind of hone in on our interests and understand where we would go professionally after school. And it kind of happened organically in that, we started working together pretty organically because our current, so my co-founder Colin and our current CEO, he started teaching himself how to code. He had this funny idea to create a Bluetooth-enabled bicycle lock that upon getting close to your bike, it would just automatically unlock. You wouldn't have to do the whole key thing, which as a college student, everyone can sympathize with that problem. And so he was teaching himself how to code, and we were all living in the fraternity house. And I see this guy literally sitting 16, 17 hours a day at his computer teaching himself how to code while everyone else is getting like wildly drunk and partying around him. And I knew eventually like I would need to do the same kind of thing. And I was, I was used to pretty hard work, even just in my high school years. So I started just sitting in the room with him and doing my own research on whatever it was that was interesting me at the time. And soon enough, Colin actually stumbled upon an interesting idea after taking a ride with Uber. So this is like 2013, 2014, just when they were starting to become somewhat popular in LA. And he came back. I remember him coming back to me and saying, this is going to change the game for college kids, at least. Like, no longer do we have to worry about taking a taxi or having a friend drive us anywhere. Like, literally pull up your phone, get a car in a minute. It's cheap, it's effective. And he actually reached out to the local management team at Uber and said, I'm at USC. I've got access to 40,000 students here on campus. I've got friends at other college campuses around California. I want to bring you new customers, and I know that you're probably going after the college demographic. I want you to pay me to do that. So they agreed to pay him $20 per new user. And Colin, if you knew him well, this would make a lot of sense. But instead of going out and like handing out flyers, he immediately went on to Google Ads and set up an account and started running ads for Uber with his promo code.
Wow.
And in the first like 2 weekends, he got like 1,000 people to sign up with his code. So technically Uber like owed him $1,000.
How much
they did not pay him $20,000 in like 2 weekends.
20,000. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, we're getting some technical feedback, but go ahead.
If you're still getting technical feedback from me, I can switch to my phone, which is probably going to be a more reliable experience. Let me know if it's an issue.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, we'll keep trying it for now. It's fine. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, I'm ashamed of it, but I'm still working on like a 2014 MacBook Pro. It's starting to give me trouble.
No worries.
Anyways, yeah, so Uber refused to pay him. I'll kind of speed this up a bit because I'm giving you like the full story here. So he took the same deal to Lyft, who was obviously trying to compete with Uber, and said, "Hey, Uber didn't pay me because I did X, Y, and Z." Because Uber basically we didn't tell you could run Google ads. Like, we're going to run our own Google ads because they weren't even running them at the time. And he said, "You didn't tell me I couldn't." So anyways, Lyft gave him the same deal, but said you can't run like Google or Facebook ads anywhere that we're going to be competing for ad spend, basically. But he knew there was something there. And so he recruited myself and our third co-founder, Cam, to basically just find ways of recruiting college students from around the country over to Lyft, and we would get paid a cash commission to do that. And we came up with some pretty cool stuff. I mean, in our heyday, we were running bots on like coupon websites, Retail Me Not, Coupon Sock. Eventually, in the beginning, we started just with manual. Like I had this program on my computer from when I was young and playing video games, where it would basically just record your mouse movements and run it on a loop. And we figured out that we could upload our code on Retail Me Not using this program automatically, just going in a loop, continuously uploading a code. And so we ended up like going to Best Buy and buying 15 MacBooks and running the code on 15 different computers so that we would constantly stay at the top. And we would literally just go back to Best Buy after 2 weeks, return the MacBooks, go to another Best Buy, get another 15 MacBooks. And so we had this operation in our fraternity house where there was like, $10,000 plus worth of MacBook hardware, or he was like, no, it must have been like 20,000. Eventually we found a way to do that in an automated fashion. We hired someone to build the program.
So, and that was all working directly with Lyft and adhering to the terms that they'd set, which were like, don't run Google ads and things like that, where you'd be competing with ad spend with them. Right. So,
exactly.
So these were like loopholes that y'all found, or different growth hacks, if you will, that you implemented, to get around it. That's pretty incredible, man.
Correct. Yeah. The two other big ones we did, so that was just like the coupon sites. The other was we hired, we basically realized that with Facebook, we could scrape public event groups. So event pages of events happening in every major city that Lyft operated in. And basically go into those public Facebook event groups and post, our graphic, our code, basically saying, hey, like, you're going to get drunk tonight, take this, new thing called Lyft. It's better than a taxi. It works from your phone, and here's $20 off your first ride. And we found some initial success with that, actually quite a bit, just posting manually ourselves. We eventually hired a team of, 10 people out in Bangladesh who would literally log in, create new Facebook accounts, because we would get reported every now and then. They would get shut down. We like to think that Facebook's like spam policies around like double factor authentication and phone verification is partly due to us, because they didn't have any of that shit. I mean, that's just what we tell ourselves, obviously not, but they didn't have any of that back in the day. And eventually we had these guys like literally going and buying SIM cards and cell phones just to create new Facebook accounts, because we were getting them shut down so quickly. In any case, we were posting in like hundreds or thousands of pages a day. That was that was probably the biggest thing that we did. We also had a college, nationwide college ambassador program that we started basically with 2,000 students working underneath us. We would give them our playbook for how to go partner with local businesses. They would take a portion of our cash commission, we'd pay them out. So between those three things, like the bots, the college ambassador program, and the Facebook groups, we brought Lyft like 45,000 users in about 11 months. And so here we were as juniors, with $250,000.
Whoa.
And just, knowing that like we didn't want to blow it on stupid shit. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah, I want to pause you. So okay, when you started to see these returns and you're finding these ways of growth hacking to drive more users to Lyft, like, and you're making this money, what are you guys thinking at this point? Is it a surprise to you, or was it kind of like you guys had a sense that this was already kind of going to happen?
It was just fun, man. It was like once we started getting the evidence of a channel working, the thought was just, how do we press the gas pedal down further? How do we scale this up? How do we get more human resources behind us so that we can expand the reach of what is working? And I think, that mindset is critical to growing any company, right? I think that was kind of the early early experiences, which was, if you see something working, double down on it and ignore everything else. So that was really the mindset, was let's just pour gasoline on this fire and see how big we can make it.
Right. Yeah, that mentality of, hey, it's working, just keep plugging forward, right? Like, and so okay, so let's get back to your story. So now you're three college guys in a fraternity running this business with kind of three different lines of operations, and you're making, you said what? You've drove 45,000 users to Lyft, and you made $250,000. Is that what you said?
It was like between $250,000 and $350,000. So eventually these channels became harder and harder to work with, and it required more and more effort. Even to make this happen, we were working like 14-hour days, like skipping class, making sure that, we realized we were getting that real firsthand experience that was not comparable to what we were learning in class. We just could instantly see that this was going to be relevant immediately after we graduated, as opposed to some of these things we were learning in B school.
Were you even going to class at that point, or like were you skipping class and just working out of the fraternity?
No, we were skipping most classes. Some classes I was in, I really enjoyed and I would go to. But for the most part, yeah, we were skipping out on class starting like our second semester of junior year.
And what, like,
Senior year, we barely went to class at all. Like Colin almost flunked out of multiple classes.
so like, what are your parents saying, right? Like, I would assume once they understand that you're not just goofing around and partying and whatnot, and you're actually running a business and it's actually really successful, that they would turn around. But and maybe not. Like, what were their initial reactions to all this?
I think it was, I mean, we, all three of us are quite lucky to have had, supportive parents, even going into the cannabis industry. I think it was really just praise from them. I mean, they knew we weren't going to drop out of school. We had no intention of not, getting our degrees. So that's, what was reassuring to them. But no, I mean, making a decent amount of money while still maintaining some semblance of normalcy as a student. I think they were, supportive, impressed, whatever you want to, however you want to describe that. But no, there was no issue, there was no concern, there was really no doubt. There was definitely some doubt when we started getting into the cannabis space, I will say that. But when we were still doing the lift thing, it was yeah, it was nothing but niceties from my parents.
Yeah. Hashtag proud parents, I bet. Yeah. You know. So Alex, so okay, so then what happened? So like you guys have this money, you're seeing the success. What happens next? I'm assuming that y'all still work together at Nugg, but I could be wrong. I don't.
No, no, you're totally correct. We've been working together now for, including all the lift stuff, it's been about 7 years. Um, I don't even know where the time has gone. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
yeah, so
I mean, and you have such an A team.
good.
Like it makes sense that you would still work together. It's the dream team, you know. So yeah. So
It's
go ahead.
it's the dream team, and there's something special about, I remember when we were first starting out, people always said, don't work with your friends. It ends poorly. Uh, I don't believe in that shit. I think some of those, like, easy sayings uh, are not broadly applicable. I mean, I'm sure there are, we may be the exception to the rule, but I'm not even convinced that that's the case. I think when you work with some of your best friends, as long as you learn how to create some of the separation and create some of the, lead separate lives as well, even, and that can be a challenge when you're really first starting out. That the trust and the transparency and the communication skills that you've built up amongst those friends can translate really easily into just being super effective in the workplace. I mean, I'm even seeing it with our larger team that once you have a tight group of people, whether it's, at the company level or just a departmental level, working together, I think the sweet spot is like between 2 and 3 years. You really see something start to click. Like magic really happens. People know each other's mannerisms. They know exactly how to communicate with one another. They understand each other's strengths, weaknesses. They understand who to communicate to. So there's definitely something to having just a really strong bond with someone that I think produces a much better outcome than, if you keep a work relationship strictly to that of almost being a stranger outside of work. So I think that's really worked in our favor. And it's been something that we've tried to kind of imbue in our company culture as well, is really, encourage people to connect a little bit more on a personal level. Granted, it's hard to do that as a remote team, and we've been remote pretty much since day one. But I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Let me wrap up and tell you how we kind of got into Nugg.
Well,
Um,
well, I mean, just to respond to that, I mean, I do agree with you. I mean, I've said before that I think one of the most important things when it comes to entrepreneurship, above anything, is human capital, right? It's the team in which you've put in place, and the management team, the leadership team, the employees that are that are on the ground doing it. And so I like that take that you'll have in that approach, in that being uh knowing each other on a personal level, because it brings it down to that human element where you do tend to care more for that person because you understand their background, or what they, their family, or what they like to do, and their hobbies. And I always thought this would be an interesting experiment. Like if I ever ran a huge corporation one day, or a big or mid-sized company even, maybe one practice that could be interesting is like, through an interview process, would be to have the person go out for a drink with them, like their final interview or something like that. They make it so far, and you kind of see how they act in a normal setting where, hey, with alcohol, or even if you're smoking, it could kind of alter their thinking in a way that could be good or bad. It could be a kind of a good test, I think. I don't know.
I've heard of that, being used by employers before. I've personally never used that one, but I do think you'd come to some, interesting experiences with people if they are getting inebriated.
Yeah.
What we've done quite a bit though is we dedicate a full interview throughout the interview process to specifically culture fit. For any other entrepreneurs out there, there's an incredible book that I could not recommend more highly called Hiring for Attitude. And it's all about like understanding the culture that your company really has and looking beyond the qualifications for a role as simply being skill based and looking for people that are going to really match the overarching culture that you have internally at your team. So the culture fit interview for us is one of the most important, and someone like gets a good score on that one with like the lead hiring manager for that role, we then pass them along to 2 or 3 other team members in different departments to also screen for culture. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think that creating that sort of a vetting process to make sure that this person is someone that you will enjoy communicating with, spending time with, whether online or offline, outside of a strict work function is critical. Now, I have no idea how this works at a large scale operation. This is our first startup. We're at about 70 team members right now, and it still works. We've managed to kind of cultivate that familial feeling. But I have heard that like at around 100 people, it just becomes inevitable that you can't maintain that like really, really tight family vibe. So will be interesting to see what tactics we use to attempt to maintain some of that as we get bigger and bigger.
Yeah. I mean, it's inevitable. And in a way it's like you get to a point, like you said, over 100 employees, then you move into a bigger building and then you see the company values on the wall, and the last ones always have fun, or something like
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
goal is to really kind of, like you said, keep that attitude of the culture alive. And it is a challenge, but it sounds like y'all are taking the right approach with it. So Alex, talk a little bit more about Nugg, and the different lines of business within Nugg, and then I want to talk about the growth hacks that you're implementing within the digital marketing space as it relates to the cannabis industry.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so Nugg started out in 2015 as an online marketplace to order delivery from trusted dispensaries in your local area. So think of it like a Weed Maps, but with online ordering. Before they had online ordering, think of it like a Jane Technologies, which I believe you've had Socrates on the podcast before as well. So we launched that in 2015, just as a result of kind of what other platforms, other founders of similar platforms identified, which was that the cannabis shopping experience was in the dark ages. There was no technology to help facilitate the discovery of trusted sellers, of which products you should be buying. There was no real means of getting access to customer reviews or testimonials, or understanding which dispensaries would be the fastest or not charge or accept credit card. There's just like no online mechanism of making that shopping experience easier. For the most part, dispensaries back then didn't even have their own websites or online menus. So we initially launched as an online marketplace, got some good early traction, but then realized pretty early on that one of our biggest barriers to growth was that we'd have people come to the website, and maybe maybe they were referred by a friend, one of our early users, and they wouldn't be able to order because this is still back in 2015, right, where there was only medical cannabis in California. Prop 64 had not yet passed, so you needed that doctor's recommendation to legally go through our time. And so we'd have people come to the site and say, hey, I want access to medical cannabis. I have had friends that have had poor experiences going to a local, pot doctor or 420 doctor or whatever the verbiage of the day was then. And can you refer me to someone that I can trust to give me like a good, comfortable experience, no bait and switch scam, like comfortable environment. And so we quickly realized this was like an opportunity for us to establish, initial relationship based on trust with these potential customers. If we could point them to a doctor that would get them certified for cannabis, and that would treat them right, give them the appropriate information that they needed to feel comfortable, then going and starting their cannabis journey, in terms of, what products should they try, what form factors might work for them, what things should they be wary of or concerned about when starting to use cannabis, what are some best practices, things like that. So we actually went out on our own, similar to how we did with our first dispensary partners, and just visited local doctors and basically went through their evaluation process as if we were a new patient. So I must have like literally 100 cannabis recommendations like in my drawer somewhere from 5 years ago, because I would just go from doctor to doctor. And we would essentially vet their process, and anyone that we thought was providing a truly like, feel good experience, but also providing the right information and education to the patient necessary, we would basically tell them, hey, we've got, potential patients that want to get certified. Can we send them to you? And so we started doing that. We would manually book appointments with these potential customers coming to our site and send them to the doctor.
Wow. You know what? I'm so glad that you touched on that, and obviously you would, because it's a core kind of component of your methodology in creating this line of business. But it's that, I watch television shows, and one that comes to mind, Entourage, where there's an episode where this is when legal cannabis or medical cannabis was legal in California, like you said before, Prop 64 in 2016, I believe, right? Um, so during that episode, they show how easy it is for one to get a marijuana license for medicinal purposes, right? And that's kind of the known thing on the street. It's like, oh yeah, you go to your doctor, tell them you have an ache and a pain, you pay $250 and boom, right? So what I love about what y'all did and the approach you took is that you actually went out and you hit the pavement, and you really went firsthand to these doctors to see if they were just kind of writing prescriptions for everyone, or if they were really taking an objective approach when it came to their health.
Completely. And look, let's not kid ourselves. There's still, even back then, there was a healthy number of people that wanted to get certified just to be able to access cannabis recreationally, which in our mind was totally fine, but we still wanted to be able to properly service the folks that were coming at it from a purely medical perspective, and ensure that they would have the experience with a doctor that would allow them to ask questions and get the information that they needed. But if someone wanted to go the recreational route, I mean, most of these doctors would pry and, make sure that you had some like base level information, or at least experience with cannabis before writing you a prescription. But yeah, that was key for us early on, is just making sure that that experience was going to be something that people could trust. Because we did see, we hypothesized from an early stage that for the marketplace model to work, and frankly for the industry in general to kind of level up and really go, mainstream in a sense, trust was the biggest barrier that I think people had. Back then, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the experience of going into a shop, but you could go into one and feel quite comfortable, and that you're getting the right knowledge and info from the bud tenders. And then you could go to another, which kind of felt like just a backroom deal, which, again, nothing totally wrong with that. But if you wanted to access a mainstream consumer and really grow this industry and grow this market, we could see that we would need, as an industry as a whole, to develop a certain level of professionalism that really didn't exist at the time. So that was key to us, to establish that first experience with the doctor as one that was really trusted. And then we, thought that people would then translate that trust into our online marketplace, and think that, okay, the dispensaries that Nugg is working with must also be ones that I can trust, because they gave me such a good experience with the doctor. So that turned out to be true, and people loved us just manually booking appointments for them at doctors. I mean, we would literally call up the doctor, say, hey, I've got this patient, what time can they come in? They're ready to go. And then we would send the patient the appointment time and the address. They would go get certified, and sure enough, they would come back onto our platform to then order delivery from a local dispensary that we had worked with. So we saw magic here, man. Like we like literally people were referring their friends to us just for us to book them an appointment with a doctor. So we, we really like dug a little deeper into that and realized that this was our first like major growth hack. This is a way that we could appeal to new cannabis consumers, bring them into our funnel without having to really pay for them, because the word of mouth was so strong. People were telling their friends to come to us for these doctor appointments. So, it didn't take us too long. I can't even remember exactly how it happened, but one of us three on the team, one of our three co-founders, realized that California had laws that allowed for telemedicine, right? This is 2015, right? Telemedicine was not a thing in any big way. Obviously, COVID has changed that. But there was also no restrictions on doctors essentially prescribing or recommending medical cannabis via a telemedicine consultation. So we quickly jumped on that, and it was kind of a crazy idea, but we figured, why not? There's nothing in the law that says we can't do this. So at the beginning of 2016, I'm sorry, this is such a long-winded explanation
This is good.
of us coming,
Don't
how
apologize.
we come to be.
Don't apologize. I'm into it. I'm sure our listeners are too. Go ahead. Continue.
Okay. So the beginning of 2016, and just to take a quick step back, remember how I was saying that Colin, our CEO, was teaching himself how to code in college? That finally came in like really in handy, because he was able to hire developers on a shoestring budget, across the world, and basically know enough to be able to work with them and guide them and create our first version application of the Nugg marketplace, and then Nugg MD, which we launched in early 2016, which was one of the first telemedicine platforms for medical cannabis. Today, it is by far the nation's largest platform for medical cannabis. We've helped, I think we just passed like 650,000 patients across 6 or 7 states be approved for medical cannabis.
So okay, so let's back up a little bit. So you saw another growth hack opportunity where you dug a little deeper, in that you saw that there was no law that said you could not be prescribed or receive a medicinal marijuana license via telemedicine, right? And so you guys thought, okay, here's a space where we need to play in, because you're already bringing customers in by referring them to doctors, by setting up appointments for them to get and obtain their license. But then they would come back to your marketplace and shop after, because you kind of helped them with that process along the way, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And we just saw, the online, because we had, this was kind of our reason for creating the marketplace in general, was we figured that an online platform could be a far better experience than, what was being done offline or done manually at the time. And, we saw Uber, Lyft, Postmates, all these other on-demand and technology-based companies kind of transforming these different verticals and industries. And so we figured, man, if we could take this doctor experience online, one that was notorious for being like, uncomfortable at best and like shady and scammy at worst, and make it, again, trusted, seamless, quick, easy, cheap, we figured we could really blow that thing up. And that turned out to be the case. I mean, people loved Nugg MD from day one. I mean, I think we launched the thing and had like 30 customers on day one, and the rest is history. I mean, it just started growing like crazy. And yeah, it was our best growth hack. To date, it is still our best growth hack, because it enabled us to create this growth engine where we could funnel these people that were getting evaluated on Nugg MD right into the marketplace to then order delivery. And so not only were we acquiring these customers for free, our growth hack enabled us to actually earn money from acquiring the customers and then feed them into the marketplace, where we would increase their lifetime value. And the way that we managed to acquire customers for Nugg MD with zero marketing dollars was, one, as I mentioned, people were referring their friends at an insane rate. And then two, we identified a big opportunity with SEO, search engine optimization. And we realized that queries search phrases for like medical marijuana card, medical marijuana doctor, medical marijuana recommendation, etc., were not all that competitive. Granted, at the time we knew nothing about SEO, but me being like an aspiring, digital marketer, I started looking at, where should I be learning? What should I be learning? And what tools and tactics and strategies should we be implementing for this startup? And, I figured there was something there with SEO. Did a bunch of research, probably took me 3, 4, 5 months to really get good at understanding the lay of the land, and felt pretty confident that there was a big opportunity there. Invested, another 6 months, almost exclusively of my time, working on improving our site's visibility in the search engine. So not only Google, but Bing, etc. 5 or 6 months of really investing time into this, we had our site taking the number one or number 2 spot for medical marijuana card, medical marijuana doctor, etc. So the fusion between the word of mouth that was already happening, and then getting people in at the top of the funnel, people that already had the intent to get a cannabis recommendation, right? Because if you're typing in medical marijuana card, or how to get a medical marijuana card, or medical marijuana doctor near me, it's clearly implying that you have the intent to purchase a service, purchase a card. So by ranking really, really well for those terms, we were able to capture people that had that intent to buy, and then bring them into an experience that was purely online and better than anything else out there, like by a order of magnitude. And so, we grew that way. And then again, compounding with the referral aspect of this thing, it basically fueled our growth for the first 2 years of the Nugg marketplace almost exclusively.
Wow. That is incredible, man. And I want to dive a little deeper into SEO. So, search engine optimization, and from at a my high level understanding of SEO is, certain key components that kind of help you build your SEO. So, social media activity, right? Because Google now counts Twitter and Facebook posts and Instagram posts. So that kind of feeds into it. Then, it's what you put on your website. So, keywords and your brand name and, things like that. And then also long form content, right? So the more content that you're producing on your site, like if you have a blog or media opportunities, if you're featured in publications that have a large audience, right, that counts, and it adds to your SEO. So are those all tactics that you implemented, or are there other tactics or growth hacks that you implemented when it comes to SEO? Because you mentioned you didn't spend much of a budget doing it. So
Yeah, certainly. Great question. So SEO is this ever evolving, kind of area of expertise, in that Google is constantly evolving their own algorithm, right? And Google's goal is to serve up the best answer to someone's question, essentially, right? And so they are known for having over 200 ranking factors that they use to evaluate a website and a page's relevancy and authority on a particular subject, such that they can serve up the best answer to someone's question, whatever they're typing in their Google search bar, right? So you hit on a few of the more important ones. I would say that for anyone getting started with SEO, social media is worth investing in for other reasons. We never found social media to be a requirement for doing really well with SEO. It's certainly like icing on the cake if you do all the other fundamentals right. But the fundamentals are definitely on-page content and optimization. So making sure that you actually have content around the information that someone might be searching for, and that you're providing it in an authoritative, easy to understand, structured way that's also visually presented well. So that's number one, having the content. Number two is having just the technical. So there's technical SEO, which is not content related, but is basically, how does your site actually function, and how is your site structured in terms of its code and the back end? Because Google, being an algorithm, or using an algorithm, right, it's basically just crawling every page, every word on your site, and it needs to be able to understand the hierarchy of the information that you're presenting to people. So having a fast website, having the folder structure be accurate such that people can easily navigate to your different pages and not have to click like 7 times just to get to a piece of information that they're trying to find. That's number 2, so technical. And then number 3 is really backlinks, right? So other sites linking to your site, which Google sees as a vote of confidence for your website, right? So Google, even if you have the best on-page content for a particular subject, but if you have a new website, Google is not going to deem you trustworthy enough yet to serve your page, you know, at the top of search results. They're going to go to, you know, for instance, before we started ranking really well for medical marijuana card or medical marijuana topics in general, you might have like WebMD ranking really high. You might have Healthline ranking really high. Even though those sites weren't dedicated to medical cannabis, they were known, trusted health websites, right? So Google trusted those more than a fledgling new site that was just starting to talk about medical marijuana. So it took us getting links from sites all across the board within the cannabis niche and outside of the cannabis niche, linking back to us to basically tell Google that, hey, we're actually focused primarily on medical cannabis card recommendation, doctor, etc. I know that, God, I mean, there's so many things to unpack with SEO, but those are kind of the fundamentals. So we started with writing content ourselves. And then the biggest growth hack I can recommend, which frankly, we've kept a secret from an early stage, but I'm happy to share some cool things that marketers can do. Sponsored content is your best friend when you're starting out. Your site does not have the authority to rank itself well enough. It's by the way, SEO, no matter what you do, is a long game. Do not expect short-term sales results from it. We're talking a minimum of 6 months if you're just starting out to see like any meaningful results, and likely longer than that. We would go to High Times, to herb.co. Leafly was out of our price range. To medicaljane.com. These are some of the legacy websites that were doing cannabis content back in 2016. Most of them are still around and doing quite well. And we would negotiate really good rates with them, saying, hey, you know, we have this incredible service, Nugg MD, that we want to promote to your readers. We'll write the article if you post it. And the key is SEO optimize the shit out of those articles. So if I go to High Times, the strategy is they have by the way, if you want me to like stop or pause or like
keep
slow
going.
this down, just let me know. Okay. We would go to High Times specifically because they were an established authority within the cannabis niche, right? If you go use third-party tools, and there's plenty of these for SEO, from SEMrush to Ahrefs, that basically give you an understanding of how sites benchmark in terms of authority, what keywords they rank for, how strong their backlink profile is. So what other sites are linking to them, and how authoritative are those sites, right? So we found that High Times was one of the leading authorities in the cannabis niche specifically. And knowing that Google wants to serve up results for a question from a website that is specific to the niche of that question, right? So if someone's typing in how to get a medical marijuana card, Google really does to serve up a High Times before it serves up a WebMD, because they see that High Times is specifically dedicated to cannabis, whereas WebMD is not. But if WebMD had better content and had the content at all, whereas High Times didn't, then obviously they're going to serve WebMD. So we realized that High Times was not actually producing content on how to get a medical marijuana card in California. So I would write an article, pay them $1,000, might have been a little bit more, a little bit less, I can't remember. We've done so many of these at this point. And I would optimize the article as if it was going on our own website, right? So I would literally tell them, this is exactly the terminology you're going to use for the H1 tag, for the H2 tag, for the H3 tag. Here are all the related keywords that you want to, that are going to go into the article, in addition to the main keyword of like medical marijuana card, because Google's looking for context and relevancy, right? So they might look for the fact that you're including very long tail terms. So like how to get a medical marijuana card in Los Angeles. They might look for those location terms within the broader context of medical marijuana card. So you'd include keywords. You'd make sure that you had enough long form content, 1,000 to 1,500 words, optimize the headings, optimize the URL structure. So I would literally tell High Times, you need to include the URL hightimes.com/ how to get a medical marijuana card. And then they would post that article. And because High Times was already an authoritative website, that article would start ranking pretty well, even without any other sites linking to it. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm sure, and I think you might have said this as you were talking about all the aspects of building this SEO within this article, but you also probably included backlinks to your site within the article, right?
Correct. So this is where you get to the next level of this strategy. So what we would do is we would go identify the highest authority website that we wanted to run a sponsored article on, targeting a specific keyword, right? Or collection of phrases that were highly similar. So medical marijuana card, High Times, the most authoritative website. We would post an article there. We would link back to our site, right? So we start getting some trust signal that we're presenting to Google. Then we would go do this again and again and again with other websites within the cannabis niche. And okay, I should say, when we started this strategy, the Nugg MD wheel was already churning. So we were earning revenues. We had some money to reinvest in marketing, but not a lot. Like really anyone on a shoestring budget can afford to do this strategy. We would go to other publications. So Herb, Medical Jane, the Cannabis, like any of these others, and basically do the same thing where we would run sponsored content on their site, but targeting slightly different keywords, maybe like the extreme long tail. So like how to get a medical marijuana card in San Francisco. We would do an article targeting that keyword, right? So it would be all about San Francisco content and like how to go through the process there. We would publish it on the Cannabis. And here's where the trick comes in. With each sponsored article that we would publish, we would link to the first one that we did with the most authoritative site. So not only would we link back to our website to continue collecting trust signal for our domain, we would essentially be boosting up that original High Times article with links from other websites.
Let me guess why. Can I guess why?
Yeah.
To increase the shelf life of that most authoritative source.
Shelf life, but also purely ranking, right? Because when we first published, even on an authoritative site like High Times, you might still have WebMD outranking you, right? You wouldn't be at the top position for medical marijuana card. But with more signal from other sites to that article, you can basically tell Google, and this is granular, but you can also, you know how when you link to a site, you're linking a specific phrase of text, right? That's called anchor text, right? So Google's also looking at what are the exact words that make up the link. So when we would post an article on another website and link back to the High Times article, the phrase that we would link on the second article would literally be like medical marijuana card. And we would only link those 3 words. That sends another indication to Google that the High Times article is about medical marijuana card. So with enough links from other sites, that High Times article just starts rising through the ranks so that it became the #1 results for medical marijuana card, or how to get a medical marijuana card in California, those types of terms. And then of course, in the first paragraph of that article, we're talking about Nugg MD and we're linking to Nugg MD. So aside from word of mouth, our initial SEO strategy was predicated on getting us referral traffic from these sponsored articles that were ranking really well. Of course, you only do this if you know that you are getting enough, that there's enough search volume out there for the keywords that you're targeting. So we would use these third-party tools to understand that, you know, people are searching 10,000 times a month for medical marijuana card. And knowing that there's a significant amount of volume, you can justify spending, you know, $10,000 on sponsored content if you feel relatively confident that you can get one of those sponsored content pieces to the top of that search query.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I know that it's a lot for, and it makes a lot of sense to me just because I do have, I mean, my background is digital marketing, specifically social media, but I've been around, you know, the other aspects of digital marketing, working at various companies, and so that all makes sense. The one thing that is surprising to me that may have overlooked is that the reinforcement of that authority, of that authoritative source, right? Because what I've always kind of thought is the more content you have out there from from multiple authoritative sources is good, because, they'll all kind of rank, right? But you always want to place your bets on the most authoritative one, it sounds like, because that's what gives it, like you said, the shelf life. And it also helps indicate to Google that that is a credible source, which cites your company and everything you're trying to communicate.
And here's the other, just for anyone listening. First of all, I'd recommend, if you're new to SEO, dive into, go to a website called backlinko.com. It's by Brian Dean, so backlinko.com. He does an excellent, updated every year, full guide on SEO. That's how I got started. He walks you through everything you need to know. The next tier to that strategy, the reason why it works is, yes, you invest as much as you can in the main article, but with each sponsored article, you then, once, say you have 10 articles, you create a web where basically all 10 of the articles are linking to the main one, but then you can go a step lower and link to 2 or 3 of the other sponsored articles with all the rest of them that you also want to rank well, perhaps for more of those specific keywords. So how to get a medical marijuana card in San Francisco. Maybe the High Times article doesn't rank #1 for that because it's more general. But with my herb article, I've targeted specifically San Francisco, and then I've reinforced that one with my sponsored content articles number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with anchor text, medical marijuana card SF, San Francisco medical marijuana card. That way, when someone in San Francisco is typing medical marijuana card, or someone elsewhere is typing medical marijuana card San Francisco, you then have the herb article ranking #1, and then the High Times article ranking #2. And so then you essentially get what's known as SERP arbitrage. SERP is the acronym for just the search results, right, that come on page 1. And so you start getting multiple spots on page 1 at the top, so that no matter what someone is clicking, because remember, position 1 gets 70% of the clicks, but it doesn't get all the clicks, right? Position 2 gets 20% of the clicks, and so on and so forth. So if you have articles in the top 1 and 2 positions, you're getting 90% of the clicks, and then you're getting the referral traffic from it. So there's layers to this thing where you basically create a web of sponsored content with well-optimized content targeting different keywords. That way you can basically get as much referral traffic as possible from all of the different kind of related search terms that are relevant to your business. Again, the key thing being that you want to target terms that people are actually typing in when they have intent to purchase, because there's a whole class of informational keywords when people are just looking to learn something, but they might not necessarily be willing to pull out their wallet and make a purchase.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, and I think it's important to mention for those listening, I mean, you don't have to go the High Times route, right? And you don't have to get published in a major publication that's nationwide, or even global. You could start at the local level, right? I mean, reach out, do your own PR and reach out to your local newspaper or your local news station and see if they'd be willing covering your farm, or if you're doing an event in the anything like that, because that helps, right? Even at the local SEO level.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. And those local, if you get links from a local publication or news station or what have you, that is incredibly relevant to Google when people locally are searching for something that aligns with your business, right? Those local indicators mean that if someone, I'm in Los Angeles, if someone is typing, medical marijuana delivery, and I've got a link from the LA Times who covered our Nugg marketplace launch, Google is much more likely to serve up Nugg in Los Angeles to that person searching, as opposed to maybe Ease, who got a bunch of San Francisco coverage on their launch, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. No, that is a good point to add for sure. And Alex, you've given us a lot of great action items, right? And the things that people can act on when it comes to implementing these growth hacks and tactics. And they're great because there's stuff that has worked for your company. And so let's talk a little more about this, but to wrap it up, I want to talk about specifically things that these business owners can do, growth hacks and marketing tactics they can implement in such a highly regulated market now. You know, as I've mentioned before on this podcast, we're still waiting on FDA guidelines for messaging and marketing and sales. And so there's a lot of hurdles and barriers that these business owners are facing when it comes to marketing their cannabis companies effectively online. So are there any loopholes and different things that they can do, say within social media or other platforms, to get around these issues?
Look, there's no silver bullet in this industry. There really is not. There is room to be creative, and there's certainly things I can recommend. But before anyone embarks on anything marketing related in the cannabis space, know that it's just a grind. It just takes creativity and a little bit, and probably a lot of luck, frankly. What I can say as kind of a rule of thumb that I would recommend is invest in channels that you own, right? Because while we all think that, legalization at the federal level is coming down the pipeline and that these different platforms are going to loosen restrictions on what we can do, for instance, advertising through Google, Facebook, Instagram, what have you, even still in a non-regulated market, you want to have certain channels that will never go away, that you fully own. So email is an obvious one. Grow your email list, and invest in connecting with your audience in a meaningful way with content that they want to consume, that's interesting to them, that is still relevant to your business. And keep being top of mind with your audience, right? You don't want to have someone subscribe to your email list and then, never email them. Being able to be in their inbox once a month, even, or every other month is totally invaluable. So growing your email list can also be done through basically leveraging other channels, right? Content marketing and SEO is one. Start a blog if you have the resources to do it. Again, you got to learn how to do this stuff, because you're not going to find success unless you learn the tricks of the trade and understand fundamentally how these channels work. So you need to understand that, with content, it's quality over quantity. You need to be doing SEO optimization on your blog posts. You need to understand how competitive a certain topic you're writing on is. You need to understand how you can make your content shareable so that it is attracting those trust signals from around the web. But you can every blog to ask people to subscribe for updates on your content, right? If they want to understand when you're posting new content or get additional content that might not be found on the blog, you ask them there. You can also get newsletter subscribers through your Instagram, through your Facebook. There's these new tools that have come out called, I think one is called Linktree, right? Where you can put it in your Instagram bio, where it'll then take someone to a page where they can see a bunch of different links to different things. Put your email subscribe button right there within that Linktree, in addition to linking out to your website or your blog or whatever else you want to point people towards. Influencer marketing is one of the only paid channels that we are using well now. We've tried Google ads, we've tried Facebook ads. We've had success getting them to work for limited periods of time, but they ultimately always end up getting shut down by manual review. Influencer marketing is one that is feasible. Of course, it's not for everyone. If you're a farm, a cultivator, it probably doesn't make sense to pay influencers to promote your product. Granted, if you have something that you can give to influencers that's valuable, that you don't necessarily need to pay them for, which is what we do with our Nugg Club box. We'll literally just give influencers a promo code that basically lets them buy a Nugg Club box from us for $1, and then they get to experience it for themselves. And if they want to share it with their audience, they can do that. Brand building, long-term brand building, even though it's not going to produce immediate sales, that is by far the biggest thing that cannabis companies need to be doing. Invest in your customer experience, create a meaningful connection with them, engage with them on different channels, email, social, offline events if you can, obviously not now with COVID, and really just create things that people want to share, that people like, create a personality behind your brand, show the behind the scenes work that you're doing, I can't recommend that stuff enough. It's not going to be something you see immediate sales effects from, but I can tell you that in the long term, it's going to pay off. And it's one of the only things you really can do in this industry. It's really hard to get people at the top of the funnel. If you can create a tool or another mechanism or another service like NuggMD, like we did with NuggMD, that we then funneled people into the other business, that's probably the best thing you can do. But it's quite the undertaking to then create essentially a whole nother product that is leveraged to get customer acquisition and then put people into your main line of business.
Right, right. Well, hey, Alex, you've shared a lot of great insights. And again, what I love about these insights is that you can take action to them, right? They're very, you can put these practices to work, these growth hacks that you mentioned in such a highly regulated market. So, and it's just fascinating, the story of the origin story of how Nugg was created. Like I said before, it sounds like you have a hell of an A team, and continue to keep blazing the trails in what you guys are doing. It's really paying off. And again, I really appreciate having you on and sharing those insights.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me, man. And I'm sorry for talking about SEO for literally half our time. I can't even believe an hour's already up. I was just yapping away there. But um, yeah, it was a pleasure to be able to talk with you, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again sometime.
Yes, absolutely. And don't apologize. I like to geek out on this kind of stuff. So I think it was very valuable for the listeners. So thanks again. I
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a great rest of the day, man.
Awesome. And thank you all for listening. Bye.